For our last show before the summer break, it's appropriate that we're by the seaside at Portobello on the outskirts of Edinburgh. With 2 miles of sandy beach, it was once Scotland's premier seaside resort, but in recent years it's become a vibrant neighbourhood, just a bus journey from Princes Street. Tonight, people from here and across Scotland's capital have joined us on the High Street in Portobello Town Hall to share their views. Welcome to Debate Night. Debate Night is the show where the people get to ask the big questions. On our panel answering them this evening, Olivier, Emmy and Golden Globe winning actor Brian Cox. Born in Dundee, Brian returns to the Scottish stage next month for the first time in a decade in his new play, Make It Happen, about the rise and fall of RBS. Originally a Labour supporter, Brian switched to the SNP ahead of the 2014 referendum and has been a passionate supporter of independence. He's also voiced frustration with a lack of progress on this subject. From the SNP, Maree Todd was today named Scotland's new drug and alcohol minister, a pharmacist by profession. Maree previously worked for NHS Highland and she's now the MSP for Caithness, Sutherland and Ross. Nicola McEwan is Professor of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Glasgow. Nicola was one of the founders of the Centre on Constitutional Change and is a specialist in devolution, intergovernmental relations and the Union. Also with us tonight, Pam Duncan-Glancy, Scottish Labour MSP for Glasgow. Before politics, Pam worked for Public Health Scotland and is now the party spokesperson for education and skills. And finally, from the Scottish Conservatives, Sue Webber, MSP for Lothian and party spokesperson on transport. Sue worked in healthcare for 25 years and became active in politics during the independence referendum. Please welcome them all to Debate Night. And welcome to our studio audience here in Portobello. It's great to be back with you here. And you can join in the discussion from home, wherever you happen to be in Scotland tonight. BBCDN is the hashtag you need if you are on social media. And our podcast of this show will be available also for you to download straight after this broadcast. We've got a lot to get through tonight, so let's get started. Our first question comes from Alan McQuinney. Alan, good evening.
Good evening. Will the Chancellor's statement today make a real difference to the Scottish economy?
Thank you. Rachel Reeves says the spending review means an extra £2.9 billion every year for Scotland, with money, extra investment for defence, carbon capture and also computing as well. £2.9 billion extra a year. Maree Todd, do you welcome that? It's good news for Scotland, isn't it?
So I think the jury is still out on that. I don't think that it's good news for Scotland at all. And in fact, I think as we analyse the information that's come to us today, what we'll find is that it's no change for Scotland. And in fact, if we look at the spending in the different departments in Westminster, we'll see that our uplift is significantly lower than most of the departments down there. So Scotland, as ever, being shortchanged by the Westminster government. The investment in carbon capture, we're glad to see.
The Acorn project.
Yeah, the Acorn project, we're really glad to see that being mentioned, but there's absolutely no detail on that. There's no detail on how much money is being invested or when it's being invested, when that's going to happen. So again, as ever, we are very keen to hear the detail of these announcements, and we are lacking in it.
But it could be good news. You're not ruling that out once you see more detail.
So I think the Acorn project will be good news. I mean, I think, as I understand it, the extra money that's going to health is actually coming from other areas. So I don't think we're going to get extra money as a whole government. So I would question whether there is much good news there for Scotland at all today. We saw, again, a bit of a lack of detail around the reversal, thankfully, on the winter fuel payment. So I'm very glad that the Labour government, that was their first act when they came into power, was to take away the winter fuel payment, and it caused absolute devastation in my constituency. I represent Caithness, Sutherland and Ross. We have a great deal of fuel poverty and we have an ageing demographic. So we're off the gas grid mainly, so we pay a lot of money for our power. And that caused absolute devastation. So I'm very glad to see that being reversed. Again, we need to see the detail.
Okay. Professor Nicola McEwan, delve into some of the detail here for us. From what you've seen, is this a fair settlement for Scotland? Labour government say this is the biggest settlement since devolution that Scotland's received.
So, I mean, you would expect that year on year as inflation rises and so on. But in terms of the increase to the block grant, so the spending that the Scottish Government has comes in part from income taxes, but quite a big chunk of it, still the majority, comes from what's called the block grant, which is a transfer from the Treasury to the Scottish Government. And looking at the figures today, it does seem that there will be a fairly modest rise annually, a little bit under 1% over the next few years until the end of the Parliament. So that's pretty tight. What that suggests to me is that where the UK government announces spending in things like health or education or other things that are otherwise devolved in Scotland, that has a knock-on effect for the money that flows to Scotland. But what the data suggests to me is that, yes, there will be additional money coming for the NHS or coming from NHS spending commitments within England, but it does seem that that's probably coming from other bits that are devolved. So the overall effect on the Scottish Government's budget is not going to be that great. That means that as before today, and in the coming months and years, the Scottish Government is going to have a tight settlement and is going to have to make really difficult choices. The forecast that the Scottish Fiscal Commission have made suggests that sustaining the kinds of spending that we have in Scotland is going to be really, really difficult. We are unhealthy generally as a nation compared to other parts of the UK. That has spending impacts. The social security commitments that have been made are going to be difficult to sustain, so there will be difficult choices to be made, regardless of what happens in the election next year.
Brian Cox, you used to be a Labour supporter.
I did, yes.
Brian,
I'm still a socialist.
Is the Labour government looking after Scotland in this settlement?
I'm not sure. I think the point about detail is really the important point. They're not very good on it at the moment. They're not very good on the A's and the B's and the C's, and I worry about that. I worry about that the sort of bland what they give you, you know, and say that's it. That there isn't a sense of what is needed and what our country needs, and I do worry about it. I do worry about. Well, I worry about a lot of things that go on, and I'm particularly worried about the attitude towards Scotland on this particular issue. That really there certainly should be more detail, but they also should certainly understand what the need of this country is. And that's what gets me, that it's a bit bland, it's a bit off, you know, just off the cuff. And I really want to see really what they think about Scotland, and I find it a little bit nebulous.
Acorn project, defence spending, supercomputer for Edinburgh University. Is Brian right? Is that not the priorities for Scotland at the moment? Pam Duncan-Glancy.
So I think that anyone who can look at what the settlement offered today and not be more optimistic than I'm afraid I could see from my colleague Maree Todd there is unfortunate, because £750 million for a supercomputer in Edinburgh,
which
and we've got that's not the case, Maree. You will know that what happened there was the supercomputer had been promised by the previous government, the previous Tory government, to Edinburgh University, but they hadn't put any money into it.
Given all the problems we've got, though, Pam, is that really going to make life better for people in Scotland right now?
Well, actually, it will increase the number of jobs here, but it will also help us with AI, it will help us with computing science, it will help us with technology, and it will help us to meet some of the challenges that we know we're going to face as a nation. But crucially today, what I think we saw was, of course, one of the biggest settlements that we've had since devolution, the £9.1 billion uplift across across the whole of the spending review period, which will give us significant amounts of money to make the choices in Scotland for the things that matter to people in Scotland. So, for example, to bring down NHS waiting lists, to improve schools and to increase house building. All of these things on the SNP's watch, of course, have plummeted. And the choices that the SNP have made have meant that Scotland has been sold badly short. So we've got 1 in 6 people living on waiting lists, 100,000 people waiting longer than a year for operations, and we've got standards in schools declining. So those are the priorities, I think, of a Scottish Labour. But they would be the priorities of a Scottish Labour government, and they're certainly the priorities that the SNP should be focused on.
Maree, Todd?
So I absolutely agree that those are the priorities, that we need to improve our NHS. We've been through a tough few years with the pandemic on the back of 15 years of Tory austerity.
We're performing 50,000 fewer operations now than we were before the pandemic.
So we've invested a great deal of money to improve that performance, and we are seeing our performance improving in Scotland by a lot of metrics. If I look at, it's not my portfolio anymore, given my job change today, but if I look at things like delayed discharges, we have significantly lower levels of delayed discharge in Scotland than we have in the rest of the UK. It's still tough in Scotland, it's still not acceptable, and we know how harmful delayed discharge can be, but the numbers for Scotland are significantly lower than they are in England and in Wales. If we look at, for example, our A&E waiting time, again, there are far too many people waiting far too long in A&E. We need to work to improve that statistic, but Scotland has outperformed the rest of the UK for 8 years.
But people are waiting in corridors for care in hospitals because you've not got a grip of delayed discharge. You've wasted £30 million on a national care service that you completely botched without a single hour extra being delivered for that funding to people in Scotland. The priorities of people in Scotland have been ignored for 18 years on this SNP government's watch.
Well, let's find out what the priorities are of the people of Scotland. Gentleman with the beard. Yeah, on you go. Yes, on you go.
Hi, you're talking about different parts of the UK. It's not as if England doesn't have people in corridors either. Let's just be positive about what they do well in Scotland.
And Labour's performance with the NHS in Wales has been the worst in the UK.
And across England, though, we've also seen that waiting lists have come down since the Labour government came into office in July last year because of the changes that the government is making and the investment that is given to the NHS. And what we've got now, I think, as a result of today, is significant increased investment in Scotland. It's now for the SNP to prove that they know what the people's priorities are here and to spend it on things that will improve lives of the people in Scotland. My take is that over 18 years they've proven that they can't do that. And if they had any ideas about improving lives in Scotland, we'd know them by now.
Sue Webber, do you welcome this settlement and where the money seems to be going?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Where the money seems to be going, do you welcome it?
Well, I think Labour have certainly woken up and smelled the coffee when it comes to some of the U-turns they've done, in particular around the winter fuel payment. But let's not forget that the SNP government also chose to remove that payment from pensioners in the winter that we've just endured. I think it's other policies that Labour seem to be forgetting is that the national insurance that they have burden that they have placed on businesses is not helping. I was pleased to get the supercomputer back in Edinburgh. If we want to have that data-driven innovation that's going to be really, really crucial to our capital's economy going forward, I was really pleased to see that return. But there's a lot of things that the Labour government have obviously had to do a sharp U-turn on, and I just... and responding to some of the comments from Mr Cox, you know, it's not up to Labour to make the decisions in what's best for this country. That's what devolution is for. And the SNP government have been in power for 18 years. They're the ones that time and time again have made the wrong choices in what's important for the people in Scotland. Healthcare is not recovering after COVID. They've had 3, 4, 5 versions of their COVID recovery plan, and the NHS is getting no better.
Brian Cox?
I can't argue with that. I mean, I think you're probably right. I mean, it's this detail thing, which I find really a little confusing because it's not clear. There isn't a clarity, and that's the clarity that I want. I want to know what that money's for and what it's doing. And I find there's an avoidance of that. I mean, we've certainly been through a pretty bad time, and the SNP have suffered quite considerably in the last few years, especially what's been happening and the undermining of the SNP. But I really do worry about the fact that we are not being specific enough about what we need and what we want and what will serve us. And I think that's being avoided. And it really worries me that that's being avoided.
What you've just said
Could I just add some of the detail?
what you said there takes us actually quite nicely, though, to our next question tonight. And I want to keep moving because we've got a lot to get through this evening. The BBCDN is the hashtag you need on social media. Our second question of the night comes from Alf Mitchison. Alf, good evening.
Good evening. With Labour's unexpected win at the Hamilton by-election, should the SNP be concerned ahead of the 2026 Holyrood election?
Thank you, Alf. Labour won the by-election with a swing of 7% from the SNP. Professor Nicola McEwan, it is a by-election. We're a year out from the Holyrood elections. What can we tell from that result?
So I think it's really important to note that by-elections tell us very little about the national picture, because turnout tends to be lower, the stakes are lower for voters, often they're used as protest votes, and they also enable parties to throw everything at it. Whereas in a national election, obviously the organisation is dispersed around the country. Having said that, I think the question was about the SNP and Labour, but I'm going to first of all turn to Sue, because I think the Conservative Party needs to be worried. And I think what the by-election suggested was essentially what we've seen in England, what we've seen in some council elections, is that the rise of the Reform Party is mostly at the expense of the Conservative Party. What it did suggest, though, is that the Labour Party appear to have held off a challenge from Reform in that by-election, whereas the opinion polls nationally suggest that Labour are at risk of losing support to Reform as well. The message for the SNP, I think, is not to be complacent, because certainly consistently national opinion polls have suggested that the SNP are round about 10 percentage points ahead of their closest rivals, which would, were that to be replicated in the elections next year, would be enough to win, but really quite significantly down on its level of support at the last Holyrood elections. There are lots of constituencies around Scotland where the margins are really tight. So I think what the by-election told us is that it may be a more competitive election next year than perhaps the national polls were suggesting, but it's a long, long way to go.
Well, you're going to be the voters next May, so I'd love to hear your analysis of this, where we are and where the SNP and Labour may be heading following that result. Brian Cox, why do you think the SNP lost Hamilton?
Well, I think there's a great dissatisfaction in the island. I mean, I'm talking about Britain. There is a great dissatisfaction about how we're governed, and I don't think we're governed correctly. I am moving slightly. I mean, although I still support the SNP, I'm moving more towards a federalist Britain. I think we need to be a more federal society where people are really represented fairly, and they're not quite at the moment. We just get one opinion versus another opinion, and we don't really see where it is in relationship to the centre of the people. And I'm finding that, you know, because of course I live between here and the US, and I'm finding it really very odd that there's not a sort of more definite understanding of what's going on. And I think the people need to know, and I don't think they are knowing, because I think nobody knows what's going on. And the rise of Reform, the way that we're swinging more and more to the right is very worrying.
But the first step towards federalism, Brian, would be independence.
Yes.
Are the SNP doing enough in your view?
Well, I think there's been a lot of I don't want to go into the details of the SNP of what I think they've been nobbled considerably. And I think that... By whom? Who knows? I think there's a hidden agenda at work. I really genuinely do feel that. I think there is very much a hidden agenda at work, and I find that very problematic and rather scary, quite honestly. And that's why the right wing are moving in a way that, I mean, Reform. Nigel Farage, for God's sake, you know, give us a break.
Should they be pushing harder? Should they be fighting harder on the independence question?
I think they should, but I think you know, they've been in power a long time, and any party who's been in power for a long time is always going to be suffering, you know, because of over-familiarity. You know, that's what happens. You know, that's the political state we're in.
Thank you. Let me go to the audience. Man with the glasses and the beard towards the back. Yes, on you go.
I feel that Reform are in the same position as Labour were in before the general election last year. They can promise anything, but it'll come, we'll only know what they're really like once they get some power.
26% of the vote in the Hamilton by-election. Lady with the glasses, second row. Yes, on you go.
I was somebody who voted no in 2014 and watched the results coming in and regretted it before it was morning. And I feel that we were nobbled then and nobbled now. And I think that whenever there's a move towards independence, all the big guns are sent in to thwart it. And I also think we're not given a true financial picture. I think there's a lot of fear-mongering and also this perception that were we independent, we would have an SNP government. I don't think we necessarily would. I think we would have a far more representative government than we have at present.
Thank you. Man with the blue shirt, right in the middle. Yeah.
I think the SNP need to join forces with other independent parties so they can have a collective and push that message forward for next year and be better together for independence.
Thank you. Maree, Todd, the question was, should the SNP be concerned ahead of the election? Clearly some people are concerned. The Herald has reported this week that 25 senior figures in the party met plotting the downfall of John Swinney if he doesn't move the dial on independence. Do you know who was at that meeting?
Oh, I have no idea. No, not at all. I mean,
does that worry you?
No, it doesn't worry me at all. What I would say, I mean, John Swinney became leader of our party at a time he was asked to be leader by the party, and he has given us unity. He has given us...
well, he hasn't given you unity if there's 25 people meeting to discuss his potential downfall.
Well, I think what you saw, I mean, what you've seen over the last year is that he has a talent for bringing the party together. He also has a talent for bringing people together across Parliament. At the time that John Swinney became leader, we were told we were never going to manage to get a budget through the Parliament, and we've done that. And we've done that with the support of 2 other parties, and 1 party abstained. So we have managed to build coalitions to get this country governed well. John Swinney absolutely is the right leader for us, and over the year that he has been in leadership, he has stabilised the party, and over the next year, I am absolutely confident he will set out his vision for the future of this country. Now, I believe John Swinney has spent his life arguing and, you know, absolutely campaigning for independence. I firmly believe that Scotland's future should be as an independent nation, and we will set that out over the next year. We talked in the last question, we spoke about the Westminster government making decisions for Scotland in devolved areas, and we said that's the purpose of devolution. What I would like is for our votes in Scotland to count for everything. So I would like to have some control over immigration policy. Yep. I come from a part of the country where we have suffered depopulation for centuries. And this latest detail on immigration that the UK government have brought out has absolutely, will have a devastating impact on Scotland. I would like them to not make decisions that harm us.
What is different here is one of those who was supposed to be at this meeting, according to the Herald, said there's no energy, there's no fire, there's no boldness, there's no long-term strategy to win us independence. What do you say to people like that?
Well, look at the polls. So 54% of people in Scotland support independence. With the rise of Farage, which is happening before our very eyes, if he comes into power in the UK Parliament, which he may well do, because Reform did very well in that election, what you see is the support for independence going up to nearly 60%. I think we're making the case for independence very well, and we will absolutely, what we need to do is listen to people. I spent a lot of time on the doorsteps in Hamilton. I'm very disappointed with the result. I'm sad that we lost Christina, and I'm sad that we lost that seat. I have spent a lot of time listening to people over the last few weeks. I absolutely recognise the priorities that people have. We need to do better, and we need to deliver better.
Right, let's listen. Let's listen to the people right now. Lady right at the back with great earrings on. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to Brian's point about the dangers of the rise of reform, although comparing the reform with Labour, I strongly disagree with. Reform are there as followers of the Trump agenda, there to do enormous damage to our democracy. And although I'm a very strong Labour supporter, I was very pleased to see John Swinney speaking up against the racism that they were displaying. So we really need to be very careful about that, and we really need to try and work together better so that we avert that danger of moving to the far right in Scotland.
Thank you. Lady with the blonde hair, here, yes.
Hi. Is it necessarily an important decision to try fast-track independence now when we're in such a time of political upheaval with the rise of the right, and we're currently in such a dire financial situation within our country? So why should we try to push this forward now rather than wait until our economy is much more stable?
Brian?
We've waited a long time. We've been waiting, and we're still waiting, and we should stop waiting. Things should start to happen.
Maree?
One of the reasons we are in such dire financial straits is because we're within the UK. If you think about one of the most harmful decisions that's been taken over the last few years is the decision to Brexit. Scotland voted against that for very good reasons. It has made all of us permanently poor. And that would not have happened if we were an independent country.
Okay. I'm going to come to you in a second, Stuart. Let me hear from the lady in the white top. Here, yes, on you go.
Good evening. I agree with the lady's point behind me and Brian Cox. What is going wrong with Scottish politicians that we're getting an influx of Nigel Farage and his merry bands up north? That must be concerning for all of them.
Yeah. Well, it's a concern for Sue Webber because Professor John Curtis says reform had your voters for breakfast, lunch and dinner in Hamilton. What's next on the menu?
I think we heard from Brian earlier on that when governments have been in power for a while, you often get sent a big message, and we got that message as a Conservative Party delivered in spades last July. We've still got an awful lot of work to do to get voters to start to trust us. And I think Russell Finlay, who is our leader in Scotland, is going about that in a very pragmatic, sensible way, and we will continue to follow that path. Common sense policies that actually resonate with people. We're not interested in the fringe issues that were capturing so much of the SNP's attention the first half of this Parliament, led by Nicola Sturgeon, whether it be hate, crime or the gender reform. So that's where we are, and we'll carry on with that message.
Thank you. Young man right in the middle here. Yeah, on you go.
The reason Reform UK are doing very well is because of the constant sneering and labelling of far right. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is actually saying what a lot of people are thinking about immigration, about high energy bills, and the constant sneering is only going to bolster support from him. So the Scottish Government should actually just get on with making Scotland actually wealthy again.
That was interesting. When you said that, there were some people shaking their heads and some people nodding as well. Pam Duncan-Glancy, what do you think?
I think we learned a lot in the Hamilton by-election, and when I was on the doors there, I heard people who don't feel that enough has changed for them. so what we've learned from that is that people want the UK government to go faster and further to improve their lives. And I think today, as a result of the spending review, we've seen that, and some of the detail on that that Brian Cox has been looking for includes the £750 million for the supercomputer, £250 million to upgrade naval bases on the Clyde side. And of course to upgrade
the national for Scots?
Well, first of all, it'll bring jobs, which will grow the economy and put money in people's pockets. But also, GB Energy, of course,
Hamilton,
also, of course, GB Energy, which is going to bring jobs to Scotland and bring energy bills down. All of these things were issues that were brought up on the door in Hamilton when we were out door knocking. But the point that was just made around the rise of reform, I think, is an important one for us all to listen to, because to me, that was a stark warning to all of us that we're not doing enough to change people's lives in Scotland, be that the UK Labour government who, as I've said, people want to go faster and further to improve lives, or be it the SNP government who, for 18 years, have, as I said earlier on, not improved lives. So that is what I think the message should be about that. And we have to separate people's desire for that need for change from sneering and politicians as well. But I have to say, some of the racism, particularly that was levied at the leader of the Scottish Labour Party, Anna Sarwar, was sickening. And I'm very, very glad that Hamilton, I'm very glad that the people of Hamilton sent the Nigel Farage packing in that respect.
26% of the vote went to reform. So they didn't really, did they?
Well, they roundly rejected the poison that comes with some of the way that Nigel Farage behaves. But they also, and we won the Hamilton by-election because we had a great candidate in Davy Russell, a local man who spent a lot of time talking to local people. But we also understand what a by-election is. It's a by-election. It's a one situation, as Nicola has said. But what it has shown is that people were fed up with the SNP. They want the Labour Party and the Labour government to go faster and further to improve their lives. And I think we're seeing that, and we've seen a lot of that come across today. And that they're beginning to put their trust in the Scottish Labour Party. Okay. And I believe that is what we will see.
All right, we keep saying listen to the people. Let's listen to the people. I'll just come to you in a second, Nicola. Lady in the glasses and the blonde hair. Yeah, on you go.
I'd like to address the elephant in the room in as much as Brian said we were nobbled. The UK Supreme Court has deprived us democratically of being allowed to have a referendum. Absolutely. And I would like to ask the panel what they think is the mechanism that will allow us to have a referendum in future, or are we scuppered, basically?
Okay, someone just shouted out there, you had your chance. Brian Cox, on that basis, what do you do?
Well, I just think we've been nobbled. And I think we really, I'm not just talking about parties, I'm talking about the country. I'm talking about this country, which I love. And I'm very proud that I come from this country. But I've seen it time and time again where there's this endless debate, this, that. And I just feel that we need unity. We need unity of purpose. And we haven't got unity of purpose. I'm sorry, but we simply don't, because we have so much dissension. And we've lost the way, really, big time. And I feel that we should resume that. We should get it back. And I don't know which party would do it, but I certainly don't think... Well, I'm not pleased with Mr. Starmer and his attitude towards Scotland, because everything for him is England. He talks about England. He talks about English football. He never, and that's what I find really... And I'm at heart a socialist, so I do really get annoyed when it's not about socialism, it's about something else. And that's what I feel is lacking. And I'm sick of it, really. I'm fed up. I come back to this country, I love this country, and I see dissension after dissension after dissension. The inability to come together. And it's an appalling situation.
So should the pro-independence parties unite like that man suggested?
Absolutely, they should. Because it's in everybody's interest. They're not interested in us. I know for a start that Starmer is certainly not interested in and doesn't want an independent Scotland. He only sees it as a kind of, a sort of encumbrance to what he is. So I'm not happy about that situation.
Nicola McEwan, is that a route? Is that a way to independence?
No. Certainly not by itself. And to go back to the lady's question, so the Supreme Court was asked to judge whether the Scottish Parliament, asked by the Scottish Government, to judge whether the Scottish Parliament had the power, the competence to be able to legislate for a referendum, and it said it did not. It was beyond its power. So it's quite clear that any route to independence or to a referendum on independence will need the consent of the UK Parliament as well. And not just to get to a referendum, but it's been quite clear from, if we've learned anything from the Brexit process, it's the importance of recognising that the decision that you make is the very first step on a very long journey where what comes next and what you negotiate thereafter, not just independence itself, but the future relationship, requires a positive and cooperative and constructive relationship. Maree is right that opinion polls are showing that support for independence is still high, historically high. Scotland is split down the middle, more or less, on the issue of whether or not independence is the right future for Scotland. But it's not, and I'm sure you've found that in Hamilton, it's not the issue that is mobilising voters on either side.
So we're split, but is it moving?
It's moving slightly, but not dramatically. But it's not the issue that is driving people to the polls either in favour of it or against it. And I think people are more concerned with cost of living, they are more concerned with public services. And one thing, I would never make a prediction about an election, definitely not from this vantage point. But one thing we can be confident about is that it will be a parliament of minorities. Whoever wins that, they are not going to by themselves be able to have the strength, the political strength, the parliamentary strength to drive things through. So my question to you, ladies, would be, given that you are likely to be the two largest parties, unless the Reform challenge is really really strong, would you work together in the way that Labour and Plaid Cymru, the Nationalist Party in Wales, have been able to do, may be able to do after the next election in Wales?
There's a challenge for you. Maree?
I think that's probably a decision way above my pay grade, but I mean, you see us work together on many issues. So yesterday,
why not on this?
So yesterday I passed a piece of legislation through the Parliament in Scotland, and I worked very closely with my Labour colleagues to deliver that. We worked together to improve particularly the issue of Anne's Law, which is a piece of legislation that means Anne Duke spent the last couple of years of her life alone in a care home, unable to see her family, and her family campaigned for that situation to change so that no one would ever go through that again.
So it can happen.
And I worked really closely with my Labour colleagues to strengthen that.
We do that. We work across party in Parliament for the good of the people of Scotland. A lot of the time. But the reality is, I have to say, we also, as parties who are in opposition just now, get promises from the government of working together, and we'll do this between stage 2 and stage 3 of a piece of legislation, and we'll discuss that with you, and we'll negotiate this. And then those meetings don't happen, or we get very last minute bits of information, so that can make it very difficult.
So the scope for it to be done better?
There is always scope, I think, to improve how we work together as politicians. That's absolutely correct. But what I will be clear on is that we think, the Scottish Labour Party think, that the SNP has taken Scotland in entirely the wrong direction. And we hope that we can convince people of that at
Nicola,
2026.
nice try. Nice try. We did our best there. Tonight we're in Portobello. It's our last show before our summer break, but we're back with you for a new series in September, travelling right around Scotland. Keep an eye on our website, bbc.co.uk/debate night, to find out where we are going to be. Let's go to our third question of the night, which comes from Moira Berry. Moira, good evening.
Good evening. With the scale of death in Gaza, should our government be taking stronger measures of condemnation towards Israel?
Well, I wonder who we're going to go to first on that this evening. Yesterday, the UK government sanctioned 2 Israeli government ministers over actions inciting violence against Palestinian communities. Pam Duncan-Glancy, is that doing nearly enough, though?
I think what we're seeing just now play out in Gaza is horrific. And I and others, including Anna Sarwar, have been calling for an immediate ceasefire for a long time. And that remains the case, and the UK government are calling for an immediate ceasefire. I think the sanctions are the right thing, absolutely the right thing to do, because we have to get to a position where humanitarian aid can pass through so that people get the support and care that they need. But ultimately, we must get to a situation where there is a ceasefire, and so that no more lives are lost. If the government need to go further as a result of those sanctions, if those sanctions don't work, and I don't have much faith that they will, I have to say, given the way things are playing out, then if they don't work, then the government will have to go further.
What about stopping arms sales?
For the time being. So I think the government have been really clear about who they're prepared and not prepared to sell arms to. I think what we have to be really steadfastly focused on as a nation is to work together with countries across the globe, including NATO, to lead the way to make this country, make Europe, and of course what's happening in Gaza and Israel a much safer place.
Okay, let me hear man in the blue top in the front row here.
The question I have at this stage is, if we're looking at the Labour government, it's not even an issue of that. We're seeing the whole world come out against Gaza, and we're seeing, for some reason, America still support them. I'm asking now, is this an issue of, do we need to stop doing something, or is this an issue of, do we need to start doing something?
Brian Cox, you
we
live
need
between
to
America
start
and here.
doing something. Yeah. We really do. What we're seeing in Gaza, and what has become in Gaza, is a genocide. It's an absolute genocide. And they're getting away with it. Now, I have a lot of Jewish friends who are also very against what's happening and very against what Netanyahu is doing. And Netanyahu he's venal. And I think what he's doing is wrong, and he should be removed. And once he was removed, that would break the right wing up considerably. But the right wing in the Israeli parliament is very powerful, and we need to move it away. And we do not make enough stand. We don't say enough is enough. It's the kids. I can't bear seeing these children who are endlessly killed. So many of these children have been murdered in this process. And I don't give a shit about the adults, excuse my language, but I really don't care about the adults, but I do care about the children. And it's the children that we are not looking after. And what we should think about, our priority should be the children, the Palestinian children who are being decimated in this way.
Israel, you know, Brian, rejects the term genocide. They say their fight is with the Hamas as an organisation rather than the Palestinian people.
That is becoming an excuse. Hamas, certainly on October the 7th, are appalling. I don't hold any brief for Hamas at all. But I still think that what they're doing is, and I can see it, what they're doing is they're taking advantage of something. I mean, look at the mess of the place. Look at what they've left. Look at the destruction that's there. I mean, how are they possibly build up another country it's going to take them years to do it. Years.
Sue Webber, has your position on this changed? Is it moving?
I think what we're seeing is, it defies belief what we're seeing on our television screens. And I think, and Brian has rightly said, the young, innocent lives are being taken, and we can see that. The approach that has been taken by the Israeli government is just not the right approach. If they have the right to defend themselves after an attack that Hamas made, but this is not the way to do it. This is not the way to go about it. They have lost the rest of the world's support that was there.
Maree, Todd?
So I think what's unfolding in Gaza is a humanitarian catastrophe. And the SNP could not have been clearer. If you remember when This first occurred when that October the 7th, that heinous attack occurred. Our leader was Hamza Yusuf, who had family in Gaza, and he led strongly from the front in trying to shape the world's view of what was happening there. And what is happening now is absolutely devastating.
What should the UK government do? Stephen Flynn said an independent Scotland would break off relations with Israel.
I think all pressure must be brought internationally on Israel to stop. There needs to be a ceasefire. There needs to be humanitarian aid. Children are now starving there, and we're all hearing. I have a couple of colleagues from NHS Highland who went out there as surgeons, and they were aghast. They have worked in other war zones, and what they were saying to me is usually in war zones, one of them is an orthopedic surgeon who's teaching techniques to avoid amputation in Gaza, and he said, I'm used to working on men in a war zone, and what I'm seeing here is women and children, and tents cannot protect them. It is devastating what is happening, and it needs to stop now. And every effort from all governments around the world needs to be focused on stopping that.
Nicola McEwan.
Next month marks the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica in Bosnia. And at that time, many of you might remember, the world watched and did nothing. In the aftermath of that, we all said never again. And the international community came together and agreed what's called the responsibility to protect. And that was a responsibility that every government took on board to avoid mass atrocities in its own country in the first instance, but in the failure of them to do that, a duty on the international community to step up and to intervene. Going back to the question, is the Labour government doing enough to do that? I do not think it is. It's difficult to know what to do, but it's also very difficult to see that you can continue to uphold the responsibility to protect and continue at the same time to issue licenses for the export of arms to Israel.
Thank you. Your views from home. The hashtag is BBCDN on social media. We have just got time. There's one other subject people were really keen to talk about here tonight. We've just got time for it if we're quick. Question number 4 tonight comes from the Reverend Moira Taylor-Wintersgill. Moira.
There have been 2 recent stabbings on Portobello Prom, and issues with under-18 antisocial behaviour has risen in the past few years. Why does the panel think this is happening, and what do they propose that we might do about it?
Thank you, Moira. We're in the town hall in Portobello, actually just a short walk from the promenade this evening on a sunny night. Sue Webber, what's going on and what are we going to do about it?
I think we've seen a really steep rise in youth antisocial behaviour in the city in general. That particular weekend, the police had a number, and as had I, a number of concerned residents from across Portobello contact us about the rise of antisocial behaviour. And that weekend, the police had stepped up visible patrols. And yet we still saw that stabbing take place, which it's really, really disappointing. What we're seeing is, I believe that this goes back to what's happening in our schools, where we've got over 40,000 incidents have happened in violence in schools, in our Scottish classrooms, and over 83% of teachers are experiencing violence in their classrooms. We need to restore discipline in our classrooms. But we also need to give our police, and there needs to be more police on our streets, they need to be given the power to stop and search our young people, take these violent weapons off them, and there needs to be proper consequences for this antisocial behaviour that is blighting our communities.
Thank you. Brian Cox?
We do not understand the root of it. That's the problem.
There's no discipline in school.
We do not understand the root of why these young people are doing what they're doing. And there's clearly a sense of dissatisfaction somewhere that needs to be addressed, and it's not being addressed. I mean, the weapons are just appalling.
It's just kitchen knives.
Well, more than kitchen knives. If you see some of those knives are really pretty hellish. And I think that's not what we're doing. We are just simply not looking at the roots of why the young people are so dissatisfied and why they are being so violent. We just simply do not examine it. We kind of say, oh, well, it's part of what it is. But it should be. And I mean, I look back now and I think, that wasn't like that when I was a kid. There was always, there were tough guys and stuff like that. But the way it's gone, it's become sort of epidemic, the stabbing. And it's got to be dealt with. But you don't deal with it unless you understand what they're going through. What's their problem? Why are they feeling alienated enough? So alienated that they behave in the way they do. And that's what we have to address.
Mm-hmm. Let's try and dig into this with the audience, some of whom who live in this local area. Man in the blue check shirt here first, yes.
The problem is twofold. One, over the years, there have been no reducing sanctions in schools, and teachers are under real pressure. No matter how badly behaved children are, they're allowed to stay. There used to be exclusions, they're not happening anymore. And the second thing is, in fact, that these young people, you're saying, why are they happening? Because there's nothing they can do. The cost of sports facilities are far too high for them, and so they can't afford to get involved in that at all. In Edinburgh, we have 4 million tourists a year, and it brings in £12 million to the local economy. Museums and art galleries are free. That 4 million tourists, if they were charged something to get into these facilities, you could transfer that money to the facilities and youth clubs to actually engage these young people in doing something positive.
We have a tourist tax coming in Edinburgh. Maybe that could go in that direction.
Lining up for
Let's
that
check out in with a real-life young person who's just behind you, the row behind you. Yes, on you go.
Is ingraining fear into children really the way to do it with the threats of discipline? I mean, it's not like we're dealing with adult men, we're dealing with teenage boys and children.
Thank you. Lady in the front row down here.
I actually have to agree with the last speaker, because I have a teenage son and I have an almost teenage daughter, and I've actually had to say to my teenage son, don't go near the beach, because because he's a tall, mixed-race young man. He could be, he could be targeted by the police, but he could also be targeted by these, the knife crime. So it is a bit of an anxious worry, because I live here and I witnessed the knife crime, and it is, I've had to say to my children, don't go on your local beach, just stay away. And that's a really bad thing when I've lived here for 20 years, to say to my children, you can't now hang out in your local area.
Thank you. Maree, Todd, that's a really sad state of affairs, isn't it? We're just across the road from the old Portobello police station, which is closed. Now, is policing the root of this?
So I think the response to this necessarily needs to be complex. I think it's a complex problem. The first thing I would say is that is a really sad story that you're having to tell your kids that they can't go on the beach.
Obviously, I've got children in school, and I've talked to fellow parents, and they've said, we are now not letting our children, we used to go on the beach, we're now like going, maybe not, or, don't go on a Friday or Saturday, maybe go during the week and during the day. And it's unfair that, as a local resident, I'm saying to my children, you can't go out.
Sure. Maree.
And what happened in Portobello a couple of weeks ago is absolutely devastating, and my heart goes out to the families involved with that, the individuals affected. It is really, lifelong consequences. So there's a couple of things I think it's really important that I say. Firstly, Scotland is a safe country. So we are very, very, it's absolutely devastating what happened here a couple of weeks ago, but we're actually seeing quite a steady and firm reduction in recorded crime. The number of stabbings has fallen, so I think there's been a 70% reduction in admission to hospital for stabbing since 2008. So there is actually, Scotland is a safe country. Any young people by any stretch watching this programme tonight, do not carry knives. do not carry knives. The consequences of carrying knives are absolutely devastating. Devastating for the individual victims of stabbing, but devastating for the perpetrators too. The life-changing consequences of that explosion of violence for everyone involved.
Thank you. Thanks, Maree. We're getting short of time here. Pam Duncan-Glancy, what do we do about this? This is replicated in other communities across Scotland as well.
It is, and the reality is, I think the data shows that violent crime is on the increase, but we also know that people don't feel safe, and that includes young people, includes adults as well. And I think Brian raised earlier on about, are we asking the questions about why this is happening? And I think we need to do more of that. We need to understand more of why this is happening. But I'd suggest there's a couple of things that might have an influence on it. First is cuts to youth services in Scotland. Young people don't have the places to go that they used to have. Leisure centres, community facilities are closed down because of cuts to local authority budgets. And in schools, our young people are really struggling to access the support that they need for their mental health concerns. We know CAMHS waiting lists are rising. We know that young people with neurodiverse conditions are struggling to get them identified. That is playing out, to be honest, in distressed behaviours. And that situation is causing an incredible amount of distress and fear for young people and adults
Nicola
across the
McEwan,
country.
what do you think?
So I think it's really important that we don't demonise young people.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it's really important to also recognise that we are talking about a really, really small and tiny minority. And I was listening to a similar case about an incident in Aberdeen the other week, and by a specialist who was identifying that at so many points up the stream, it could have been prevented. Yep. So there are people, professionals, youth workers, teachers, they know what to do. They know who the people are who are vulnerable. They know that they can step in and need to be supported by government and others to do that.
We've got some of them in the audience, I think, tonight. We've only got 30 seconds left, but man in the white shirt with the glasses. Yes, on you go.
Just to back up on that point there, we have students in the school that wait almost 3 years now for things like dyslexia diagnosis, which is a relatively minor, relatively easy thing to get. Same with anxiety, but why do we get so much media attention when things like a £300 fuel cut goes to old age pensioners, but we don't get any attention towards things like MyPass getting cut and services for students getting cut
Thank
that
you.
do lead into that?
That question will have to hang in the air until the autumn when we come back on air again, because that's it from Debate Night for this week. We're off for our summer break. Back with you in September. Details of forthcoming locations are on our website. Take a look at that to find out where we will be. If you missed any of tonight's programme, we're repeated on BBC One Scotland at 10:40, or you can catch it any time that suits you on the BBC iPlayer. Thank you very much indeed to my panel tonight and a brilliant audience here at Portobello in Edinburgh, and to you at home for watching wherever you are. We'll see you after the summer. In the meantime, stay safe, stay well. From all of us in Debate Night, good night. Thank you very much.